Welcome, folks. Today is Thursday, September 21st, 2017. I'm Joe Monday, and you're listening to another edition of RSF Radio, a podcast where we talk about what's been going on our Street Fighter over the past week, and general FGC stuff. It's just, sometimes it comes up. Like, for example, a certain game that might have been released earlier this week. If you have been out of the loop, MVCI was released earlier this week, and it's all right. Like, I'm just digging into it now, so I'm just kind of getting into how wacky that game is, because there's a whole lot of bullshit that can go on in that particular video game. But there's kind of a lot of mud being thrown, let's say, at the game for everything surrounding it. Like, if you spent $200 per se on this game, you might be disappointed. That's neither here nor there, nor is it Street Fighter related. Instead of passing the buck on to MVCI, let's talk about what's going on in Street Fighter. First up in the news. Speaking of releases, actually, this was something that leaked unintentionally by a website, which was, what was the name of the website? Leaked by Shopto. It's not something I've ever been familiar with. I've never been to shopto.net previously, but as you can see here, Eurogamer made a post earlier this week announcing that Street Fighter V Arcade Edition it's found its way into their shop for some reason. For one way or another, it ended up there on the front page. There weren't a lot of details going into what would be in it. We can speculate what might be in it, like in arcade mode, because why would you call it Arcade Edition? Let's not get into the whys or hows. It's not important to figure out what might be in a game. What's called Arcade Edition, it probably should have an arcade mode. Although it would be a pretty funny joke if it didn't. But that's just my opinion. That's a well-crafted joke. It's a year-long joke in the making. But so this kind of alludes to things where this could be the revamp to Street Fighter V that it so desperately needs. I mean, it's been kind of kicked to the curb by a lot of players. Its Steam reviews are abhorrent. But release something like this that gives you access maybe to Season 1 characters, maybe even additionally Season 2 characters for, 30 or so bucks for people who are getting into it brand new. Give a lot of updates to people who already own the game. Give them arcade mode. Give them what we've been asking in the community feedback there. Just give us all those things. Give us the netcode maybe that MVCI has, because it's actually... Wait, we don't talk about MVCI here. Netcode's actually all right. But give us those things, and maybe at that point, maybe that's the turn. Maybe people feel okay about it. I mean, it took them about 1.5 2 years to get there, but maybe that's the turning point that Street Fighter V needs. I mean, if you look back at the history of Street Fighter releases, the first edition of any of them is not the one that you want to actually go play. You're not actually going back to play Street Fighter 2. Like full stop Street Fighter 2. You're going back to play Super Turbo or a Championship Edition or Hyper Fighting or whatever the hell, Rainbow Edition. You're going back to play those versions. You're not going back to play vanilla Street Fighter 4. There's some broken stuff in vanilla Street Fighter 4, and you don't have access to all the characters. Like, it's just there's not as much there for you to do. You're going to play whatever version of that game you like the most, and this could be the point where it starts to turn for Street Fighter V. It might not be. They might totally screw the pooch and not release an arcade mode with Arcade Edition, if that's even what they're calling it. But let's hope that speculation ends up positively for them. Let's say. It could be nice. All right, moving on. Here's an interesting thing. Happened with the Minot patch. We had people report through testing, and they walk you through all the steps of how they tested it, what they're testing it on, and they have video proof of it, video evidence, let's say, at least to show you what they did to get to this end result. but the post was a new vid to show the amazing input lag on my PC by iBananaKiller. And long story short, the dude shows sub 4 frames of input lag on his computer. This was not tested on PlayStation 4. I think someone later went on to test the PlayStation 4 version via his methods, and got, it was something that we were used to. It was around, like, again, 6.5. But the point of the story is this particular player walks you through all the steps, how they got there, and shows input lag of sub 4, which is, they cut it in half if it holds up to the display lag results. I guess the testing is a little bit different from how display lag did it, but let's say display lag tested again. There was a tweet earlier from display lag who did the original testing of, that's why you get the whole meme of 8 frames. They did that original one. That's what people kind of go by as standard. They not just doing fighting games display lag, they do a whole bunch of things that show all the lag, which is represented in not games but monitors, things like that. They're thorough. They're very thorough in their testing. They have plans to do another test of Street Fighter V. Will it be 4 frames? Will it be sub 4 frames on PC for them? The jury's still out on that. But it could be helpful. Maybe maybe they patched it and didn't tell us. It wouldn't be the first time. Street Fighter V. And speaking of input lag, there's actually this, I don't necessarily agree with this entire post. There's parts of it that I disagree with, but it was someone who went through and did some testing on whiff punishing medium attacks in Street Fighter V. The way that they do it, it's all kind of canned motions of Ryu standing there pressing the crouching medium kick and then that person being ready for it and whiff punishing with a certain button. But I appreciate how thorough they go into the mechanics of what's happening. I don't necessarily think that this person knows exactly what's going on when you're thinking about whiff punishing, what you're doing in the neutral, when you're thinking about what button to press to whiff punish, what you're looking for your opponent to even whiff at certain ranges. Not necessarily sure that's all panned out, but there's a lot of really interesting discussion going on in that thread, so I highly recommend you check it out. That was posted by Feckless earlier this week. All right, what's next? Okay, here was an actual article written by ESPN on what all of it basically asked the question, who do all of you pros think is the best player and how do you plan on beating them? And everyone that ESPN asked, even the player himself, said Punk was the best. It was a unanimous decision by everybody. Everybody said he's the best, and that makes sense. And he's played so dominantly. Granted, his tournament results, as of late, hasn't been taking that first place over Tokido like he did at EVO. But let's just put it out there. Even his wins at EVO were still so dominant and impressive that he's just played so solid for the past couple months that he is highly considered to be the best player. He's the top player. He's what's everybody's gunning for, that position, to be in the position that Punk is, and he puts in his work too. This dude plays a whole hell of a lot, and it kind of is interesting to see other top players' takes on how they would want to beat Punk. I think Justin Wong raises an interesting question, that Punk really understands Street Fighter V and that he will almost never tech throw. The damage and, let's say, Oki pressure you get off of a throw isn't really as hurtful to you as if you were to take a counter hit into a big combo. Like, those things kind of make sense when you start thinking about it. And it's not necessarily true of all of the Karen matchups. Like, you might want to attack a throw. You might want to try avoiding throws in certain situations. Like for example, against Geef, he picks Nash. He doesn't play Karen. When he plays Karen against another Karen, mirror match against Justin Wong, he'll eat a throw because he doesn't get really good throw Oki. It makes sense. It just explains kind of what level Punk is thinking of in terms of matchups and just how dominant he plays. So highly recommend go checking that out. That's on ESPN. That post was posted by Saki EU. Sup, Saki? Anyway, moving on, a little bit of sad news. Punko announced earlier this week on Twitter that he will no longer be joining us for the CPT tour. I just did an ATM machine moment just then. I just realized that the CPT, he will not be able to be there, and he kind of alluded, he didn't give much information as to why. That's not public knowledge, but he did allude that he might not even be available to play in the upcoming season. So whatever's going on with his life personally, I hope everything pans out for him okay. He's a good dude. He's a very strong player. He's a very interesting player to watch. He always brings the hype. I don't think he's taking his shirt off anymore. You got to pay money to see that. That's a little extra on top. But shout out to that dude and all the work he's done in the FGC. He's a good dude. Maybe send him some love. I don't know exactly what his position is right now, but hit him up on Twitter. Follow him on Twitter for any updates on that, because that's where we heard from him. That's the last we've heard from him. All right. A little bit of lighthearted mood a lighthearted video to change the mood. But if you've been around the FGC long enough, and are used to watching these videos, if you don't follow Liang Hub on YouTube, I highly recommend doing so. This dude has been putting out compilation videos of just like silly moments and things that you just aren't used to seeing sometimes. The consistent quality of the sheer wackiness that this dude encounters is some top quality content. I highly recommend checking out even his older stuff. Like go back and dig through this dude's history. There's a lot of videos out there posted by the same dude who is still doing it, still posting wacky setups. It's a fun time. If you're looking to kill some time, if you're looking to be entertained by some of the FGC's funnier moments, let's say, check out that dude's channel. Like and subscribe to Liang Hub on YouTube. Forget his Twitter account though; it's something different. I'll share that one in the comments. That'll all be linked later on. All right. A little bit on the tech side of things. There was a post earlier this week about Ed stuff. Ed's not necessarily a character a lot of players put a lot of work into. Not a character that you see a lot of tournament side. For certain reasons, it kind of makes sense. If you look at Ed as a character and his capabilities, like if he's not point blank when he starts a combo, he's not really guaranteed that damage. He might be out of range when he goes to cancel. It kind of makes sense to not want to lean towards that when your combo might drop. You might whiff a big special there and then get punished for big damage in Street Fighter V. These things happen. But specifically in this post, posted by Nez, he didn't link the video in the comments. He didn't link the video in the OP. He linked it in the comments, so you got to scroll down and hit up that link right there. It's an interesting video. It shows a whole bunch of V-trigger stuff, shows like max damage situations, max stun situations. If you plan on playing Ed, or if you just want to learn what Ed is capable of, if you're having trouble with that matchup, hit up this thread, check out that video, learn about Ed. Tell that man you want Ed. Moving on. This was an interesting thread that I'm in full agreement with. It is a basically self-help thread posted by Castle09, and what they did, and they actually showed the results of it. That's what I love about this post. They show like empirical data that this had results. There was work put in, and they got results. So cool stuff. But what they did was they removed certain things from their gameplay. They said, I will not jump. What are the other things that he says? No reversals, no Oki, no mix-ups, no meter combos, no trigger pressure, no V trigger pressure, no frame traps, or no jumping. Which I don't necessarily agree with that list of things. I have another personal list in Geef's Gym. It's one of the later It's one of the later lessons in the meta. Go check that out, of things that you can self-impose on yourself to say, I'm not going to do these things. Once I get a knockdown, I'm going to send it back to the neutral because I need to work on my neutral game. And that's that kind of weight training, right? Where you impose certain limitations on your gameplay to say, I'm not going to do these things. Some of them is like good advice, like no jumping, potentially good advice. If you find in yourself that you aggressively jump too much, there's a difference between good jumping and bad jumping. So when I tell people no jumping, I actually don't just say no jumping. I actually think that's bad advice. What you kind of have to say to that is, well, you can neutral jump, or if you do jump, have a reason as to why you jump. Be able to like write me a paragraph on why you jumped. Put it that way. If you can't put enough in that paragraph as like supporting evidence as why you jumped in red pen, lacks supporting evidence. If your answer is just because they might throw a fireball, that's not good enough. I'll scratch that with a red pen. That's an F. That's a big old F minus. Have reason to do so. And what this does, when you take those things away, you start overcompensating in other areas. You start looking at the neutral different. You start playing things different. And sometimes that can be what it takes to open up your mind in a way to play differently and actually improve in ways that you would have otherwise not improved on. You might lose. That's actually the beauty of it, is that through this, he goes on to explain that he actually lost a lot of these matches and he played very silly. And he's like, this isn't a good way to play. Like if you're looking to win a match, if you're just looking to win a match, it's not a good way to do it. But what he's doing is looking in ways that he can improve. And when you take that away from a match, it doesn't actually matter if you win or lose that round or that set. If at the end of the day, you end up taking something away that makes you a better player. Going along with this, actually Sonic Fox posted, I think it was even earlier today, or it might have been yesterday, that win or lose, if he loses, it doesn't matter. If he's learned something, then he wins, is something along the lines that he quoted on Twitter earlier this week. And I feel like that is so true. If you can take a loss, pull something from it, and improve upon that, then you actually haven't lost. That's actually a personal victory, and you should be proud of that. And that's kind of what this guy did. That's what Castle09 did, and he showed evidence of it. There's a good conversation to be had there, so go check that one out. And one of the last things to bring up before we head on to tournament results is kind of, again, sad news. This is really something that is, I don't know if the FGC has really experienced this before, but the way that it was handled on the back end was very professional. There was a tragedy at Thunderstruck, Mexico, last weekend, where one of the players, our own FGC, passed away at the event. From all reports say that it was medical reasons. There was a heart condition, something along those lines. That tragedy just struck, and that the tournament organizers had to deal with that on time. So if you were watching that stream and it cut away, they actually did. Here's what was actually interesting. They did come back. There was no commentary. They just showed the matches, and it was like, does the show go on? Do you pay attention to this? Do you even show this on stream? Because like it could be a personal issue. There was a lot of unknowns going on, but thoughts and prayers with the family members of and family and friends of this person where tragedy is struck at Thunderstruck last weekend. But speaking of the results of that, Chris T traveled down there and took home first place. That was a CPT event in Mexico this past weekend. Other winners this weekend from Street Grand Battle, which was a CPT in Lyon, France. Problem X took it with his Bison, so good stuff to him. There was another CPT event, which was Oz Haddo in Sydney, Australia. And that was taken by Moke, who was the Rashid from Top 8 at EVO earlier this year. Not a CPT event, but also something that was pretty interesting to watch, was ESL, Brooklyn Beatdown. What people were really looking forward there, and we actually did get to see it, was the first time that Tokido and Punk would come up against each other, potentially, in battle. We all kind of thought, it's probably going to end up Punk and Tokido, but Punk got eliminated before before finals, and in the end, it was Tokido taking it over Fudo. Tokido taking first, of course. So shout-outs to Tokido and his still dominant play. Actually, really surprising that no one said Tokido in that ESPN article. I'm just saying. It's weird. He keeps on winning and no one keeps... I'm just saying. It's weird. Tokido's very strong. No one's going to take that away from him. But anyway, for all of the upcoming tournaments, I would recommend, and this is something to look forward to this weekend, follow Ace King Offsuit on Twitter if you don't already. That's just my go-to guy of looking at his spreadsheets, looking at his schedule, seeing here's where you can see something, here's what's going on this weekend. The way that he collects and presents data it's a thing of beauty. I highly recommend following Ace King Offsuit on Twitter, and let that guy know that you appreciate his work. That dude is putting in work in hours to bring that information to the forefront, keeping it all in one place for you guys so that you know where to watch things. So if you want to find out what's going on this weekend, follow Ace King Offsuit on Twitter. All right, moving on to the next section, user questions. Gonna keep things short this week. Gonna move on to a very basic question that we get on the sub from time to time is, I don't know who to main. Who should I play? I like to play a character. And I think that the advice given is effectively the same every time. And the most important takeaway from who should you main is effectively, who do you like the best? Just play who you like. Honestly, a lot of times it kind of doesn't matter who you play, and especially at not professional level. If you're not playing professional level, it kind of doesn't matter exactly who you main. Even like tier lists don't even matter until you get to a certain level. So if you're just even looking for a character, just play the character you like. At lower levels of play, there's actually pretty good arguments to be made for like low tier characters actually probably perform well in lower level play, because lower level players aren't experiencing that many they don't have low tier character experience. Like Fong does super well in low tier because ain't nobody know how to play against the Fong. At some point you gotta learn the matchup. I get it, but he can get away with a whole lot of bullshit. But that's just play who you like. That's go with your gut, play who you like. If you do want to get into things, if you want to get into like the nitty gritty, there are things that you can do. There's actually a Geef's Gym meta lesson on picking a main, and a lot of it goes into just play a lot of different characters, because there's actually a lot of benefits to seeing what other characters are capable of. If you get out there and you spend a whole week on a character you've never thought of playing before, you learn like a hit confirm, you learn a good punish B&B, just learn like your regular B&Bs, like just like one of each. You learn one Oki setup, you learn your anti-airs. Just like learn those 5 things with a character, playing for a week. Let's say you play a grappler character typically, and then you switch to Guile or something, which is a very different type of play style. Even switching that for a week will, when you eventually go back to a grappler character, you'll have a different perspective on things. You'll have a more refined palette when it comes to understanding the neutral, thinking about space, like understanding how threatening you are as a grappler. Like there's certain ways that you'll look at things differently having played a diverse set of characters. There's a myriad of advice to give on selecting a main, but at the end of the day, go with your gut, go with God, choose the character you like, always, and also make sure it's Zangief. But that's just rule number 1. If it's Zangief, play Zangief, not Mega Zangief. I'm a muscle purist. Anyway, moving on to the last segment is the historic match in FGC history. This week is a set that comes up actually pretty often because it is so entertaining. This is one of the matches that I always point to and say, if you want to see the payoff of hard work and determination in overcoming bad matchups, watch this set. The set is Alex Valle versus Bonchan, Evo 2015. Alex Valle playing Hugo, Bonchan playing Sagat. Historically, in Ultra Street Fighter 4. This is not a very good matchup for Hugo. Sagat, very good at zoning. He's got a lot of normals, a lot of buttons to keep Hugo away. Hugo, it's not the worst matchup. Like, I would almost consider that Zangief Sagat was a much worse matchup. It's probably a little bit better than that, maybe around like a 7-3 matchup. But thinking about this, Matt, you look at Bonchan, a very solid, tried and true Sagat. Bonchan is Sagat in this game at that time. A very strong player. But the way that Alex Valle just like shanks this dude, pantses him in front of everybody. He beats him to the point where it is almost an embarrassment, which isn't, not even saying that in a rude way to Bonchan. Dude still played solid, but Alex Valle just put in the work. And you can actually, something interesting about this particular set is Alex actually went on record, I think this was a couple weeks later, and it's actually posted in the comments. I'll share the link to the video after this, and I'll share the Alex's post on this. But later on, weeks after this had happened, went on Twitch to explain exactly what happened before the set, where Alex played his set through pools earlier that day, and then he looked ahead in the bracket, saw he would come up against Bonchan. He knows he plays Hugo. He knows Bonchan's going to play Sagat, so he grabs Flo. And he just grinds out that matchup. And as he's playing against Flo, he says, "No, Flo, like, don't stand there because I can do this. So you should do something else here." Basically explaining to someone else how exactly to beat a Hugo as Sagat, which then in turn made him play that match so proficiently to where when he comes up against Bonchan in the bracket later that day, he came guns blazing. He came knives out. He was ready to cut a fool. And the way that it ends is absolutely, like, the conditioning that went on through that entire set, perfect. It is a thing of beauty. Highly recommend checking it out. Like, pull it up once every couple months to say, if you ever run into a this is something that I always bring up and like to show people, is that if you ever come into a matchup and think, I can't beat this character, this is bullshit, this is a 10-0 matchup, I'll never win. I play Zangief, Minot is a 10-0 matchup, I can't do it, not even gonna try. Highly recommend watching this set and thinking to yourself, what if I put in a little bit of extra work? What if I think about this matchup in ways I might not have thought of before? Maybe I'll put in the work, maybe I'll be a stronger player. And that's what makes this particular set, that's kind of what makes fighting games in general so exciting to watch from a viewer perspective, of watching someone overcome such a bad matchup when you know exactly what kind of bullshit they have to deal with in a particular matchup, to see them overcome it, not only overcome it, but to just crush it, slam dunk from the 3-point line. It's like watching Jordan come up and just dangle in front of all y'all. It is a thing of beauty. Highly recommend checking it out. We'll post the links to that video in the comments below. And that about wraps it up for this week. Not a whole lot going on our Street Fighter this particular weekend. Come back and check for tournament results, of course, and come back next week every Thursday, Friday morning for another edition of RSF Radio. Again, I'm Joe Monday. Take care, folks.